My ex-wife's mother asked me if I was good in bed in front of a room full of people. And the worst part is I answered her. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Jake Merritt. I am 38 years old. I own a small contracting business in a mid-sized town in Tennessee. The kind of place where everybody knows your truck, everybody remembers your wedding, and nobody lets you forget your divorce. 3 years ago, my marriage ended. Not with a big fight. Not with plates thrown across the kitchen or doors slammed hard enough to shake the walls. It ended quietly, the way a fire goes out when there is nothing left to burn. Claire and I looked at each other one evening across the dinner table and both knew, without saying a word, that whatever we had built together had already come apart at the seams. We just had not told anyone else yet. The divorce was final on a Thursday. I remember because I had a job site inspection that morning and I showed up with the papers still sitting in my truck, signed and stamped and real in a way I had not expected them to feel. My foreman Travis asked me if I was okay. I told him I was fine. He looked at me the way a man looks at another man when he knows the truth but respects him enough not to push it. I went home that night to a house that was half empty. Claire had taken what was hers, left what was mine, and the line between the two was cleaner than anything we had managed in the last year of our marriage. I sat on the back porch with a beer I did not finish and listened to the neighborhood go quiet around me. Crickets. A dog barking 2 streets over. Someone's television through an open window. I told myself I was okay. I told myself this was the right call. I told myself that starting over at 35 was not the worst thing that had ever happened to a man. I kept telling myself that for 3 years. I am not going to pretend those years were dark in some dramatic way. I went to work. I paid my bills. I showed up when friends needed help moving furniture or fixing a busted water line. I was fine in the way that a house looks fine from the street even when the foundation has a crack running through it. I just stopped expecting anything to feel like more than getting through the day. Stopped making plans that reached past next week. Stopped letting people close enough to notice the difference. Travis tried. He is the kind of friend who shows up with food when you have not answered texts and who calls you out when you are lying to yourself. He would say things like, "You need to get out more," or "There is someone I want you to meet," and I would nod and change the subject, and he would let me because that is what good friends do. They push until they know you need them to stop. Then they wait. He was waiting right up until he told me about the wedding. Claire's cousin Bethany was getting married in April. Big family event. Half the county invited. Travis had been roped into attending because his wife grew up with Bethany, and there was no graceful way out. He called me on a Wednesday night and made his case. "You are not family anymore," he said, "so nobody can make you feel weird about being there. But you know, half the people, the food is going to be good. And honestly, Jake, I am not sitting through 4 hours of toasts and slow dances without someone to talk to." I said no. He showed up at my job site the next morning with 2 coffees and the same argument delivered in person. I said fine. The reception was held at an old barn venue outside of town. The kind of place that costs more than it looks like it should and has string lights hanging from every beam. Round tables with white cloths. A band that knew enough covers to keep older guests happy. An open bar that Travis located within 30 seconds of walking through the door. I stood near the edge of the room with a drink I was not really tasting, watching people I half knew move through the kind of easy happiness that belongs to weddings, even borrowed happiness, even temporary happiness, and I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that showed up whenever I spent too long watching other people's lives. That is when I saw Sandra Holloway. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. Sandra is Claire's mother. I had known her for nearly a decade. She was at our engagement dinner. She helped Claire pick out furniture when we bought our first house. She brought food to my job site once when Travis mentioned I had been skipping lunch for a week. She is the kind of woman who remembers things about people, not because she is keeping score, but because she actually listens when you talk. I had always liked her, respected her, appreciated the way she treated me like a full person even when Claire and I were falling apart. I had never thought about her the way I was suddenly, without any warning or permission, thinking about her right now. She was wearing a deep green wrap top over dark trousers, her silver gray hair pinned back at the sides. She moved through the room like someone who was comfortable taking up space in it, stopping to say hello here, laughing at something there, never hovering, never performing. She looked like a woman of 58 who had survived real things and decided to enjoy herself anyway. She spotted me near the bar, smiled, walked over. "Hey stranger," she said. "Hey Sandra," I said back, like an idiot. And just like that, we were talking. Easy and natural, the way you fall into conversation with someone you have history with, even complicated history, even history that belongs to another chapter of your life. She asked about the business. I asked about her garden, which she had mentioned wanting to expand the last time I saw her, over a year ago at Claire's birthday. She remembered that I had been dealing with a difficult supplier. I remembered that she had wanted to try growing tomatoes for the first time. Felt normal. Felt good. It felt like something I had not felt in a long time without being able to name what exactly I was missing. Then her friend leaned over and said something in her ear that I could not quite catch over the noise of the band. Sandra turned back to me, tilted her head slightly, and with the same calm voice she might use to ask about the weather, she said it. "You seem like you would be good in bed. Are you seeing anyone?" I want to tell you that I handled that moment with grace. I want to tell you that I smiled, made a smooth joke, and steered the conversation somewhere safer. I want to tell you that because it would make me sound like a man who had his feet under him. I did not have my feet under me. The bar noise did not stop. The band kept playing. People kept laughing at other tables. But in the small circle of space between me and Sandra Holloway, everything went very still. Travis, standing 2 feet to my left, made a sound like a man who had just swallowed something the wrong way. One of the women nearby turned her head so slowly it looked deliberate. Sandra herself held my gaze without flinching, like she had said something completely reasonable and was simply waiting for a response. And I gave her one. "No," I said. "I have not been seeing anyone. I have not been able to. Not I am single. Not a laugh and a subject change. Not any of the 10 normal things a person says when they are caught off guard at a wedding bar. I said the true thing. The thing I had not said out loud to another human being in 3 years. The thing I had barely admitted to myself on the back porch at night when the neighborhood went quiet and there was nothing left to distract me from it." Sandra did not look surprised. She nodded slowly, just once, the way someone nods when a thing they suspected turns out to be true. Then her friend touched her arm about something else and the moment broke apart like it had never happened. I stood there holding my drink. Travis leaned close. "What was that?" he said. "I have no idea," I told him. He looked at me for a long second. Then he looked at Sandra across the room. Then he looked back at me with the expression of a man who was going to have many questions later and was already deciding which one to lead with. The rest of the reception moved around me. I ate food I could not have described 10 minutes after finishing it. I watched Bethany and her husband share their first dance. I clapped at the toasts. I did all the things a person does at a wedding while another part of my brain sat very quietly in a corner and replayed a 10-second exchange on a loop, trying to figure out what had just happened and why it felt like something shifting underneath the floor. Sandra did not come back to the bar. I saw her at a table across the room, talking with a group of women her age, laughing at something, relaxed and easy in the way she always was. She did not look over at me. She did not seem like a woman rattled by what she had just said. She seemed like herself, which somehow made it worse and better at the same time. When the evening wound down and guests started moving toward the parking lot, I ended up outside at the same time she did. She was standing near the edge of the lot looking through her bag for her keys. The venue lights threw a yellow glow over the gravel. Somewhere behind us the band was still playing one last slow song for the stragglers. The night was cool and smelled like cut grass and someone's bonfire a few properties over. I almost walked to my truck without saying anything. I almost let the whole evening close over itself like water over a stone, clean and quiet and done. I did not do that. I walked over and said, "I hope your drive home is not too far." She looked up, found her keys, smiled in a way that reached her eyes. "Not too bad," she said. "You?" "About 45 minutes," I said. "My place is out past Ridgeline Road." And then instead of saying goodnight, we talked for 20 more minutes right there in the gravel lot. She asked how the business had been since the divorce. Not with pity, just with the straightforward interest of someone who had watched me work hard for years and wanted to know if it had paid off. I told her it was growing slowly, that I had hired 2 new guys in the fall, that it felt like something that was finally starting to hold its own weight. She told me her garden had done well this year. The tomatoes had worked out. She had grown more than she could eat and had started leaving bags of them on neighbors' porches, which she found more satisfying than she expected. I told her that sounded like something she would do. She looked at me when I said that. Not long, just a beat, like she was checking something. Then she said, quietly and without any particular setup, "I always thought Claire did not know what she had." I did not know what to do with that sentence. I still do not entirely know what to do with it. It was not flirtatious exactly, or maybe it was, but it was also just honest in the way that Sandra was always honest, without making a production of it, without asking you to do anything with the truth except sit with it. She said goodnight, got in her car and drove out of the lot. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes before I started the engine. I drove home with those words running through my head the whole way back on that dark stretch of Ridgeline Road. I thought about the whole of her, the way she had treated me with steadiness and decency through every hard season of the last decade, the way she had never made me feel small, the way she had shown up at my job site once just because someone mentioned I had been working through lunch for a week, not to say anything meaningful, just to make sure I ate. I thought about what it would mean to want someone like that. I thought about all the reasons it was a complicated and probably foolish thing to be sitting here thinking about. Then I thought about her voice saying, "I always thought Claire did not know what she had." I pulled into my driveway, sat in the dark truck for a minute, and said out loud to nobody, "Well, that is a problem." Then I went inside, put my keys on the counter, stood in my kitchen that was too quiet in the way it had been too quiet for 3 years. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I did not feel like a man just getting through the evening. I felt like a man who was waiting for something, though I could not have told you what. I found out 2 weeks later when she called. She called on a Thursday evening when I was halfway through fixing a cabinet hinge in my kitchen. I saw her name on the screen and stood there holding a screwdriver like I had forgotten what it was for. I answered on the third ring. She said she had been thinking about the parking lot and felt like she had overstepped. That the thing she said at the end had been too much and she wanted to apologize for putting me in an uncomfortable spot. I put the screwdriver down on the counter. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. There was a short silence. Then she let out a small breath, almost a laugh, like she had been holding it and my answer had surprised her into letting it go. We talked for an hour. I do not remember deciding to talk for an hour. It just happened the way water finds its level. She asked about a renovation job on an old building downtown that was giving me problems. I told her about the walls that kept revealing surprises every time we opened them up. Pipes where there should not be pipes. Wood that looked solid and was not. She said that sounded like people. I said I thought she was right about that. When we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a while. The cabinet hinge was still sitting there unfinished. I did not get back to it that night. She called again 2 days later. This time I picked up on the first ring and did not pretend otherwise. By the second week, we were talking almost every other day. Not long calls always. Sometimes just 20 minutes. But they were the kind of 20 minutes that left me thinking for hours after. She said things simply, directly, without decorating them. She did not perform warmth. She just had it. When she asked if I wanted to meet for coffee, I said yes before I finished processing what she had asked. We met at a small place on the east side of town. Not the main strip where everybody goes. A quieter spot with mismatched chairs and good coffee, and no one who was likely to report back to half the county. I got there first. I was already regretting the location I had chosen because the chairs were too close together and I had nowhere to put my hands that felt casual. She walked in and I forgot to be nervous for about 30 seconds. Which was enough. She was wearing a tie-front plunge top in a soft burgundy. Her silver-gray hair loose around her shoulders for the first time I could remember seeing it that way. She sat down across from me, wrapped both hands around her mug, and said, "Okay, tell me something true. Not small talk. Something real." I looked at her. I said, "I spent the last 3 years telling myself I was fine. I got pretty good at it. I think I even believed it for stretches. But fine is not the same as okay, and okay is not the same as good, and I have not been good in a long time." She nodded like that was exactly the kind of answer she had been hoping for. Then she told me about her marriage ending. Not as a long story. More like a shape she traced with her words so I could understand the outline of it. Claire's father had needed to be the largest thing in every room. Not loudly always. Sometimes just by the way he took up air. She had spent years adjusting herself to fit the space he left her. Moving quieter, wanting less, apologizing for things she had not done wrong. When it ended, she said the hardest part was not the loneliness. It was realizing how long she had been lonely before she left. Something in my chest pulled tight when she said that. I told her about the last year with Claire. How we had stopped being curious about each other. How I had kept trying to build things, fix things, improve things around the house, busying my hands because I did not know how to fix what was actually breaking. How Claire had told me once, near the end, that she felt like she was living with someone who was always working on the house they shared but never inside it. I had not told anyone that before. Not Travis. Not my brother. No one. Sandra looked at me across that small table and said, "She was not wrong about that, Jake. But that does not make you a bad man. It makes you someone who learned to show love through doing and forgot to just be there." I sat with that for a long time. Not because it stung. Because it was accurate in a way that felt less like criticism and more like someone handing you a map of a place you had been lost in for years. We stayed at that coffee shop for 2 hours. The chairs were still too close together and I still did not know what to do with my hands, but none of that mattered anymore. Walking out to the parking lot, she said, "Same time next week?" I said yes before she finished the sentence. Driving home along Ridgeline Road, I noticed something I had not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter than that. The feeling of looking forward to something. Of having a reason to check my phone that was not work. Of wanting a week to move faster so I could get to the end of it. I did not name what it was yet. I was not ready for that. But I stopped pretending it was nothing. Claire found out on a Tuesday. I do not know who told her. I never found out. In a town like ours, information moves faster than rain clouds, and by the time it reaches you, nobody remembers who started it. All I know is that my phone rang at 7 in the evening while I was eating leftover soup at my kitchen table, and when I saw her name on the screen, something in my stomach already knew the call was not going to be friendly. I picked up anyway. Her voice was not loud at first. That was the part that caught me off guard. Claire was never a quiet kind of angry. She was the kind of person who said exactly what she felt the moment she felt it, which was one of the things I used to love about her and one of the things that wore me down by the end. But that Tuesday she started low and controlled, like she had been rehearsing. She asked me if it was true. I told her yes. The quiet lasted about 4 seconds. Then she said things that I am not going to repeat word for word, because some conversations deserve to stay between the people who had them. What I will say is that she used the word betrayal twice. She said I had always had a way of taking things that belonged to her. She said her mother was not some prize I got to collect after the marriage ended. I let her finish. When she was done, I said, "Claire, we have been divorced for 3 years. She said that was not the point. I asked her what the point was. She hung up. I sat on my back porch for a long time after that. The yard was dark except for the light above the garage door. Crickets going. Somewhere down the street, a dog barking at nothing. I kept turning the call over in my head, looking for the part where I had done something wrong, and I could not find it. But I also knew that not being wrong does not always mean something stops hurting. My phone buzzed against the armrest. A message from Sandra. 5 words. I heard she called you. Then, a few seconds later, I am sorry. This is not worth hurting you over. Maybe I should stop. I stared at that last sentence for a long time. Maybe I should stop. I knew what she meant. I knew she was trying to do the decent thing, trying to hand me a clean exit before things got messy. Sandra was like that. She always thought about other people before she thought about herself. It was something I had noticed about her for years, long before any of this, back when she was just Claire's mom who made good coffee and asked real questions. I typed back, "Do not stop." She did not answer right away. I put the phone down and went inside. Made more coffee I did not need. Stood at the kitchen window looking at the dark backyard. 20 minutes passed. Then my phone lit up on the counter. She had written, "You know this is not simple." I wrote back, "I know. I also know the last few weeks are the first time in 3 years I have actually looked forward to waking up. The complicated part does not take that away." Another long pause. Then, okay. Just that one word. Okay. But I read the whole thing in it. What happened next I only heard about after the fact. Sandra told me a few days later, calm and matter-of-fact, the way she told most hard things. Claire had driven to Sandra's house. They had sat in the living room, not the kitchen where they usually talked, and Claire had said what she needed to say. Sandra had listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she had said, I am your mother and I love you, but I am also a person. And I am not going to apologize for being one. Claire had cried. Sandra had cried. They had not resolved everything that night. But they had said the real things out loud, which is more than most people manage. Sandra showed up at my job site the next morning. I was up on a ladder checking a roof repair when I heard her car pull in. I came down. She was standing in the gravel in a light jacket, her silver-gray hair catching the morning sun, hands in her pockets, eyes tired but steady. She looked at me and said, I need to know if you mean what you said in that message. I stepped down off the last rung and said, I meant every single word. She nodded once, slowly, like she was filing it somewhere safe inside herself. Then she said, I am not easy to be with, Jake. I have a complicated family situation that is probably going to stay complicated. I have a daughter who is angry right now and might stay angry for a while. I have years of being careful behind me and I do not always know how to stop being careful even when I want to. I said, I am a contractor. I am used to things that take longer than expected and cost more than the estimate. She laughed at that. A real one. The kind that reached her eyes. And standing there in the gravel outside my job site with sawdust on my jeans and coffee going cold in my truck, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I want to tell you that everything got easy after that morning in the gravel lot. I want to tell you the hard parts were behind us and what came next was just two people figuring out how to be happy. But that would not be honest, and Sandra deserved honesty more than she deserved a clean story. The first real test came about 6 weeks later. We had been spending time together quietly. Dinners at her place. Evenings on my back porch. Long drives on Sunday mornings where we talked about everything and nothing. We had not put a name on it yet, had not made any announcements, had not pushed past the careful middle ground we were both standing on. It felt fragile in a way that was also somehow good, like something new that had not hardened yet, and I did not want to rush it. Then Travis opened his mouth at a job site. Not meanly. Travis was never mean. He was just the kind of person who said whatever was in his head without running it through any kind of filter first. We were finishing up a kitchen renovation and one of the other guys on my crew asked why I had seemed lighter lately. Travis said, because he is seeing Claire's mom, without even looking up from the cabinet he was installing. The crew went quiet. One guy actually set down his drill. I did not explode. I did not make a big scene. I finished the job, drove home, and sat with how it felt to have something private become public before I was ready. It felt like having a window open that you did not open yourself. Not a disaster. Just a draft that got in somewhere cold. When I told Sandra that evening by phone, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, it was going to happen eventually. This is a small town. I said, I know. I just wanted us to decide when, not have it decided for us. She said, does it scare you? People knowing? I thought about that honestly, the way she always made me think about things all the way down instead of just at the surface. I said, no. What scared me was not being sure I deserved something good enough to protect. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you are going to have to stop waiting for permission to believe that. We had hard weeks after that. Claire called Sandra twice and the conversations were not warm. A few people in town made comments, the kind that get back to you through 3 different people before they reach you directly. Someone told my buddy Ray that it was strange, and Ray told me, and I told Ray that people were welcome to find it strange from a distance. But here is what I did not expect. I did not expect Sandra to be the strongest person in the room every single time things got hard. Not loud strong. Not defensive strong. Just clear. She knew who she was in a way that I was still learning to be, and being close to that kind of person does something to you over time. It straightens something out. One night, about 4 months in, we were sitting on my back porch after dinner and she went quiet in the middle of a sentence. I waited. She had a way of gathering herself before she said the things that really mattered. She said, "I spent most of my marriage feeling like a background character in my own life. Like the story was happening around me and I was just keeping the house running and nodding at the right moments. I forgot what it felt like to be someone a person actually turned toward." I did not say anything right away. I had learned by then that Sandra did not always need a response. Sometimes she just needed a witness. After a while I said, "I turned toward you." She looked at me sideways with a small smile. "I know," she said. "That is the part one am still getting used to." That night she cried a little, not from sadness exactly, more like something releasing that had been held too long. I did not try to stop it or talk her out of it. I just stayed there, present, which was the thing she had asked me, in the form of a question that embarrassed half a wedding reception, if I was even capable of being. Turns out I was. I just needed the right person to ask. A year from that Tuesday phone call with Claire, things looked different. Not perfect, just real. Claire and Sandra were still finding their footing. Some weeks were better than others. There was a Sunday lunch the three of us had in early spring where it was stiff and careful but nobody left early, and I counted that as a win. My crew stopped making comments because there was nothing left to say. Sandra came to my job sites sometimes, brought decent coffee, asked real questions about the work, and the guys liked her because she was genuinely likable and did not pretend to be anything else. And on a quiet Wednesday evening with no occasion attached to it, Sandra was standing in my kitchen making us both tea. She was wearing her satin plunge camisole in ivory, the one she had started keeping at my place, her silver-gray hair loose around her shoulders. I was leaning in the doorway watching her and I thought, this is what I was missing. Not the big thing, not the grand gesture, just a person moving around your space like they belong there, and you knowing with your whole chest that they do. She caught me looking and said, "What?" I said, "Nothing. Just looking." She handed me my mug and said, "You know, I got a lot of raised eyebrows when I asked you that question at the reception." I said, "You got a lot more than eyebrows." She laughed. Then she said, "Was it worth it?" I wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at her standing there in my kitchen, steady and real and fully herself. I said, "It was the best question anyone has ever asked me. And I meant it."